My dad told me not to come to the family party because I'd embarrass myself in front of my sister's new boyfriend. They were shocked when he called me his boss. The name's Jason, 25 years old, and I'm that guy you've seen 1,000 times at Starbucks. Skinny jeans, noise-canceling headphones, and a MacBook plastered with stickers, including my favorite Keep Austin Weird, one that's peeling at the corners. I'm basically a walking cliché, and I know it. To most people looking at me, I'm just another freelancer doing some coding stuff. To my family, I'm their personal 24/7 tech support hotline. Jason, the Wi-Fi is acting up again, has been their greatest hit since the 90s, back when I was collecting Pokemon cards and secretly wishing I could be as cool as Kurt Cobain without the tragic ending. My parents absolutely worship my sister Melissa. She's basically an Instagram goddess who wears high heels even when she's just grabbing toilet paper at Target. Her entire existence is a highlight reel, always with smoothie in hand. Perfect lighting somehow, following her everywhere she goes. Her life is straight out of Sex and the City, while I'm the guy everybody calls when the router needs resetting. Nobody ever asks what I'm actually doing with my life because, well, I'm just Jason, the guy who fixes things and disappears into the background. But here's the truth that nobody in my family has bothered to discover. I'm not just Jason. I'm the co-founder of an AI startup in Austin that's actually doing something meaningful. Our chatbots are smarter than my dad when he's arguing politics over Thanksgiving turkey. We just secured $8.6 million in funding last month, but I haven't told my family. Not a single word about it. Why keep quiet about something that big? Well, as Bob Dylan once said, a man is a success if he gets up in the morning and gets to bed at night, and in between he does what he wants to do. I want to be seen for who I am, not just suddenly respected because of a dollar amount attached to my name. I guess I was waiting for someone to actually ask me about my life before I volunteered that information. My apartment in downtown Austin isn't fancy, just exposed brick walls, a king-size bed, and my battle station set up with 3 monitors where I spend most of my waking hours. The fridge usually contains nothing but energy drinks, leftover pizza, and that one container of blueberries I buy every week to pretend I care about my health. The plants are all fake because I killed the real ones within a week. Very on brand for a tech guy, I know. Last Tuesday night, while debugging a particularly nasty issue in our codebase at 2 a.m., I got a text from my college roommate Marcus. Dude, TechCrunch just featured your company. You're blowing up. I smiled at my phone screen in the dark. The article called our AI revolutionary and potentially industry-defining. Meanwhile, my mom still thinks I'm playing on a computer for a living. The next morning, my co-founder Aiden sent a champagne bottle to my apartment with a note. We made it, you magnificent nerd. We'd met 4 years ago at a hackathon in San Francisco, both sleep-deprived and over-caffeinated, building something that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Now we had a team of 28 people in an office with one of those annoying ping-pong tables that tech startups are contractually obligated to have. I never set out to be secretive about my work. At first, my family just never asked, so I never told. Then as things started taking off, it became this weird game. How long could I go before someone in my family actually expressed genuine interest in what I was doing with my life? So far, the record stood at 3 years and counting. Last Christmas, my dad spent 20 minutes telling me about his new golf clubs while I nodded along. Not once did he ask what I was working on. My mom kept trying to set me up with the daughter of her bridge partner. She works with computers, too. You'd have so much in common. The daughter worked at the Apple Store Genius Bar. Close enough, I guess. Melissa's Instagram fame grew with each heavily filtered post. She had somehow turned taking pictures of herself with various foods and workout equipment into a lucrative career. Good for her, honestly. She was smart enough to monetize being photogenic in a world that values that sort of thing. We just operated in completely different universes. As Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. I wasn't desperate, exactly, but there was this quiet ache of being unseen by the people who were supposed to know you best. And yeah, I could have just told them, but that would have felt like begging for attention. Pride is a stupid thing sometimes. When investors started calling, Everything accelerated. Suddenly, I was in meetings with people who had funded companies like Spotify and Airbnb. They were betting on us, on me. I'd come home from these meetings feeling like I was living a double life. Tech wunderkind by day, invisible sun by night. The irony wasn't lost on me that our AI was designed to understand human communication better, to pick up on subtle contextual cues, to actually listen to what people were saying. Meanwhile, my own family couldn't seem to hear me unless I was telling them how to fix their printer. 3 weeks ago, I marked Mom's upcoming 60th birthday on my calendar. It fell on this coming Saturday, and I decided to surprise everyone by showing up unannounced. I booked a flight, even splurged on business class because, well, I could afford it now. I hadn't been home for almost a year, and despite everything, I still missed the familiar smell of Mom's lavender candles and Dad's terrible dad jokes. I kept the trip a secret, thinking about how surprised they'd be to see me walk through the door. Maybe I'd even casually mention the funding round if the moment felt right. No pressure, just a by the way kind of thing. I even ordered a smart speaker for Mom as a gift, customized with a special message. For your 80s playlists, play them when you miss me. Last month, we launched our beta to selected users. The feedback was incredible. People were using our platform to create content, learn new skills, even cope with loneliness. We were making something that mattered. I wanted to tell someone who'd be genuinely proud of me, not just impressed by the valuation. I almost broke the silence a few times, like when my dad complained about his retirement portfolio taking a hit, and I nearly blurted out that I could buy him a new one if he wanted. Or when my mom worried about medical bills, not knowing I could pay them off with a single transfer. But revealing it then would have made it about money, not about me. Everything changed with one phone call. It was a Tuesday evening. I was making ramen, the fancy kind that cost $3 instead of 30 cents, when my phone lit up with Dad. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some residual childhood programming made me answer. "Your mom's turning 60 this weekend," he said, without even a hello. "Melissa's bringing her new boyfriend. He's some big-shot tech executive at that company everyone's talking about. Makes serious money, apparently. Look, maybe it's better if you don't come. All you'll do is talk about your computer games or whatever, and it might be, well, a bit embarrassing for your sister. She's trying to impress this guy." I laughed, but something in my chest turned to ice. Don't come because I'd be embarrassing? Because my undefined computer stuff wasn't prestigious enough for Melissa's new boyfriend? My own family was ashamed of me. They thought I was some basement-dwelling loser who hadn't achieved anything worth mentioning. I'm not some villain from the Justice League who skips family gatherings to plot world domination. I'm just a guy who built something incredible and wanted someone to notice without having to point it out. "Actually, I'll be there," I said, trying to sound casual. Wouldn't miss it. There was a pause on the other end, like he was genuinely surprised. "Well, all right then. It's on Saturday at 7. Your mother's doing her usual finger food spread." After hanging up, I glanced at my calendar and realized I had already booked a flight home for this weekend. I'd marked Mom's birthday months ago, planning to surprise them. Ironic that now they were trying to uninvite me. The expensive ticket I'd purchased weeks ago suddenly felt like the best investment I'd ever made. As Vonnegut would say, we are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be. I pretended to be invisible for too long. I packed my good shoes, the ones without coffee stains, and a button-up shirt that didn't have a tech company logo on it. Maybe I'd even get a haircut before the party. Go full Clark Kent. They wouldn't know what hit them. They think I'm just a Wi-Fi guy? Fine, let them think that. But it's time they learned that the quiet kid tapping away at his laptop wasn't just playing games all these years. He was building something big, and they're about to find out exactly what. As I confirmed my flight details, I felt strangely calm, like I was finally ready to let the two halves of my life collide. They're going to regret treating me like I'm invisible, not because I'll be cruel or petty, but because they'll finally realize what they've been missing all along. And that realization is going to hit them harder than any revenge I could plan. I closed my laptop and looked out at the Austin skyline. This was going to be interesting. Saturday arrived faster than a JavaScript promise. My flight landed at 3 p.m., giving me plenty of time to prepare for the evening's festivities, or ambush, depending on how you looked at it. Instead of grabbing an Uber like a normal person, I decided to rent something that screamed, "I'm doing better than you think." Not a Ferrari or anything that desperate. Just a sleek black Ford Ranger that wasn't covered in bumper stickers from 2008 like my old Honda back in Austin. The rental place, guy kept trying to upsell me on insurance. "Sir, you never know what might happen." I wanted to tell him that the only accident happening tonight would be my family's collective jaw hitting the floor, but I just smiled and declined. Some punchlines are better delivered in person. I checked into a hotel instead of staying at my parents' house. The Holiday Inn wasn't exactly the Four Seasons, but it had clean sheets and no childhood photos of me with braces and a bowl cut. Perfect for a strategic homecoming. I showered, changed into a casual but expensive outfit, the kind where nothing has a visible logo but somehow costs more than a month's rent, and headed out. Driving through my hometown was like flipping through an old yearbook, familiar yet distant. The Blockbuster where I rented my first R-rated movie was now a vape shop. The diner where I had my first date was still there, probably serving the same rubbery pancakes. As Nirvana played to the car speakers, "Come As You Are" felt a little too on the nose. Maybe I should have chosen something less dramatically ironic for the soundtrack of my revenge tour. I parked a block away from my parents' suburban ranch-style home, the one with the slightly crooked mailbox that Dad never fixed because he was getting to it. Taking a deep breath, I looked at myself in the rear-view mirror. Maybe I should just turn around, I thought, suddenly feeling like an imposter in my own story. But as Roosevelt once said, the only man who never makes mistakes is the man who never does anything. I wasn't about to do nothing. Not tonight. Walking up the familiar concrete path to the front door, I could hear laughter and the unmistakable sound of my mom's favorite 80s playlist through the windows. The smell of her famous lemon squares wafted through the air, the one she always made for special occasions, which apparently included Melissa bringing home a boyfriend, but not my regular visits. Not that I was bitter or anything. The front door was ajar, classic suburban party etiquette. The house was packed with familiar faces. My mom's bridge club friends, Dad's golf buddies, and various relatives who only materialized for cake and free alcohol. The living room looked like a Beverly Hills 90210 reunion special. Mom had gone all out with decorations. Blue and silver balloons, her favorite colors, bobbed against the ceiling, and a giant 60 and Fabulous banner hung above the fireplace. Mom was in the kitchen arranging frosted cupcakes on a tiered stand, looking the same as always but with slightly grayer hair hidden under caramel highlights. Dad was in the corner telling his signature golf jokes to a captive audience of bored-looking men clutching beers. And there was Melissa, in the center of the room like a sitcom star, posing for what I assumed was a TikTok video, a mimosa in one hand and her phone in the other. Next to her stood a tall guy in a blue button-down and designer glasses who had to be Ryan. He looked exactly like the type who would have a LinkedIn profile that included the word disruptor. I recognized him immediately. Of course. Ryan Thompson, my product manager, hired 6 months ago. We'd had a few video meetings where I actually had my camera on before I went full remote and voice only. He'd met me in person twice. Once during his job interview when I shook his hand briefly, and once at the company holiday party 4 months ago, where we exchanged maybe 10 words in a crowded room. He probably wouldn't recognize me immediately in this context, which was perfect for what I had planned. I slipped inside quietly, like a hacker at a black hat conference. Present but undetected, no one noticed me at first. I moved through the crowd of tipsy adults, catching snippets of conversations about retirement plans and someone's recent knee surgery. The beautiful mundanity of suburban existence. Making my way to the kitchen, I stood behind my mom, wrapped gift in hand, and waited for her to turn around. When she finally did, her eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said simply. The room didn't exactly go silent all at once. It was more like a wave of quiet that spread from the kitchen outward. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. Dad, mid-golf joke, trailed off into awkward silence. Aunt Carol dropped a deviled egg on the carpet. But the real money shot was Melissa. She quite literally gasped and spilled her mimosa down the front of her white dress. That's when Ryan turned to see what had caused her to ruin a perfectly good Instagram outfit. It took him a second, that brief moment to try and place a familiar face in an unfamiliar context. Then his eyes widened and the recognition hit his face like a system crash. Jason! Wait, you're your Jason Chin? The Jason Chin? My CO. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a mouse click. Mom looked confused. Dad's face turned a shade of red. I'd only seen when the Patriots lost the Super Bowl. Melissa stood frozen, mimosa still dripping from her dress. Hey, Ryan. I replied casually, as if we were passing the office hallway. Didn't know you were dating my sister. Small world. Ryan's mouth opened and closed several times, no sound emerging. In the office, he was articulate and confident, always ready with a PowerPoint presentation. Now, he looked like someone had just told him Santa wasn't real. You two know each other? Mom finally managed to ask. Ryan works for me. I explained, enjoying the moment more than I probably should have. He's our product manager. Does a fantastic job, actually. Works for you. Dad repeated, his tone suggesting I just said Ryan worked for a unicorn circus. Ryan finally found his voice. Jason is the founder and CEO of EchoMind, the AI company I've been telling you about, Melissa, the one that just secured the funding. He was staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. I met him at the interview and the Christmas party, but I never made the connection that he was your brother. He's my boss. The $8.6 million funding round, I clarified helpfully. Sometimes precision matters. Melissa's face went through a fascinating journey. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, something that looked suspiciously like calculation. But you do computer stuff. I do AI stuff, I corrected. Artificial intelligence. The thing that's revolutionizing industries and making tech headlines. That stuff. I handed Mom her gift, neatly wrapped in silver paper, with a blue bow. This is one of our smart speakers. It's programmed especially for you. The note says it all. Mom took it mechanically, still processing. The note read, for your 80s playlists, play them when you miss me. As Andy Warhol once said, in the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. This was definitely my 15 minutes, at least in the universe of my parents' living room. The silence stretched on, heavy with unasked questions and sudden recalibrations of reality. Ryan was the first to recover. I didn't realize. I saw you at the Christmas party, but it was so brief. You're always so private at work. Nobody talks about your personal life. He looked at Melissa. He never mentioned having a sister. I've been telling you about this brilliant, mysterious EO for months, and he's been your brother this whole time. I like to maintain separation between personal and professional. I said, quoting some business book I'd skimmed once. Keeps things objective. Dad cleared his throat. You own an AI company? Since when? For years, I replied. Started it right after college with my roommate. You met him once. Aiden? The guy you said would never amount to anything because he had blue hair? I watched his dad mentally flip through his catalog of dismissive judgments. The punk rock kid? That punk rock kid and I just sold 20% of our company for $8.6 million. So I guess the blue hair wasn't holding him back too much. The room erupted into chaotic conversation. Suddenly everyone had questions. Aunt Carol wanted to know if I could fix her Facebook account. Uncle Bob started telling me about his $1 million app idea that was basically just Uber for dog walking. Mom's bridge friend wanted to know if I was single and if I'd meet her niece who was very accomplished and worked at a bank. Through it all, I watched my parents' faces. Mom looked like she was mentally rewriting the narrative of her son's life. Dad seemed to be calculating my net worth in his head. Melissa was furiously typing on her phone, probably updating her social media to include that her brother was a tech CEO. After about 15 minutes of this circus, I decided I'd made my point. As philosopher Alan Watts said, muddy water is best cleared by leaving alone. I'd stirred things up. Now it was time to let the sediment settle. I made a show of checking my watch. A minimalist timepiece that cost more than my first car. I should get going. Early flight tomorrow. Business in Seattle. You're leaving? Mom asked, sounding genuinely disappointed. But you just got here. Just wanted to drop by and wish you happy birthday. The speaker has instructions. It's pretty intuitive. I paused. Unlike your family relationships. That last part slipped out before I could stop it. A little too honest, a little too raw. But sometimes the truth needs its moment in the spotlight too. Ryan was still looking at me like I was an optical illusion that changed depending on the angle. Should I come into the office on Monday? He asked uncertainly. Of course. You're doing great work. This doesn't change anything professionally. I gave him a reassuring nod, then turned back to my parents. The cupcakes look delicious, Mom. Sorry I can't stay. And with that, I made my exit, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on my back as I walked out the door. In movies, this would be the moment for a dramatic last line or a cutting remark. But real life isn't always so neatly scripted. As I reached the doorknob, I overheard Melissa whisper loudly to Dad. Is he seriously, rich now? I smiled to myself as I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The game was just beginning, and I'd made my opening move. The drive back to the hotel was surreal. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd put down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for years. Maybe it wasn't the most mature way to handle things, dropping a success bomb and then disappearing. But sometimes you need to shatter perceptions before you can rebuild relationships. My phone buzzed with texts almost immediately. Ryan, we should talk. I'm so sorry. Had no idea. Mom, please come back tomorrow for lunch? Dad, surprisingly, proud of you, son. That last one made me laugh out loud. Funny how an $8.6 million valuation suddenly makes you worthy of parental pride. Melissa's text came through as I was pulling into the hotel parking lot. OMG, Jason, why didn't you tell me? I could have been posting about this for months. Also, are you hiring? Also, Ryan is freaking out. Also, can I interview you for my podcast? I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. As Mark Twain wisely noted, the right word may be effective, but no word was ever as effective as a rightly timed pause. This was my pause, carefully timed for maximum effect. Back in my hotel room, I kicked off my shoes and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me with a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd wanted them to see me, really see me, for so long. Now they had, but only because of what I'd achieved, not who I was. Maybe that's how it always works. Maybe we're all just the sum of our accomplishments in other people's eyes. Or maybe, as I was starting to suspect, I've been complicit in my own invisibility by never demanding to be seen. I ordered room service, an overpriced burger and a beer, and thought about what came next. The dramatic entrance was easy. The hard part would be navigating the aftermath. Did I want a relationship with my family, now that they suddenly found me interesting? Did I want to forgive years of dismissal, just because they were now impressed? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had options. I wasn't just the tech support guy anymore. I wasn't just the invisible son. I was Jason, CEO of EchoMind, and I had just stolen the show at my mother's birthday party. The game had definitely begun, and I was finally playing to win. After the grand revelation at Mom's birthday party, I expected something, a tearful phone call, a heartfelt text, maybe even a handwritten letter. Mom was old school like that. But instead, I got nothing but silence. Radio silence, as they say in the business. The kind of silence that's so loud it keeps you up at night. I flew back to Austin the next morning, half expecting someone to show up at the airport. Dramatic family reconciliations seem to happen there a lot in movies. But the only person waiting for me was my Uber driver, Eduardo, who was far more interested in telling me about his side hustle selling homemade hot sauce than in my family drama. Back in my apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. My cactus, yes, I have a cactus named Spike. The only plant I can't kill sat in quiet judgment on my windowsill. I flopped onto my couch and stared at the ceiling. Maybe I'm actually a ghost, I thought to myself, like in The Sixth Sense, but instead of being dead, I'm just invisible to my family. The first week after the party, I threw myself into work. Our AI was getting better detecting emotional nuances in text, which felt like a cosmic joke, given my family's emotional intelligence seemed to hover somewhere between a potato and a brick wall. Aiden noticed I was working even more insane hours than usual, but didn't push when I deflected his questions. That's why he's a perfect business partner. Knows when to press and when to let things breathe. The second week, I started checking my phone less obsessively. Ryan was professional in our meetings, though I could tell he was walking on eggshells. I finally told him over Slack that his relationship with my sister wouldn't affect his job performance reviews, which seemed to relax him marginally. He did mention that Melissa was now telling everyone she was basically a tech industry insider, which made me snort coffee through my nose. The third week, I'd almost convinced myself I didn't care. Almost. As the philosopher Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. I was reacting by pretending nothing happened, which is definitely one of the healthier coping mechanisms I've developed over the years. Certainly better than my college phase of subsisting entirely on energy drinks and spite. Then, on Tuesday of the third week, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. I nearly dropped in surprise. After 3 weeks of silence, he finally had something to say. I took a deep breath and opened the message. Jason, I've been diagnosed with hypertension. Insurance doesn't cover much of the treatment. Could you send a couple thousand? No, how are you? No, sorry we treated you like you were invisible for years. No, congrats on your success. Just send money. I stared at my phone for so long that Spike the cactus could have grown another inch. A couple thousand. Like that time they needed a new air conditioner because it was just so hot, and I sent them $4,000 no questions asked. Or when Melissa was renting an apartment in L.A. for a big career opportunity that turned out to be a 2-week influencer retreat, costing me $3,000. I wasn't their son. I was their personal Venmo account. I thought about just sending the money and moving on. That's what I've always done. Be the responsible one. The fixer. The ATM. As Chuck Palahniuk wrote, we buy things we don't need with money. We don't have to impress people we don't like. Except in my case, I was buying things other people needed with money. I did have to impress people who didn't even see me. I typed out a dozen responses, each one more passive-aggressive than the last. Deleted them all. Finally, I wrote, I'll help, but first I need to know, who am I to you? Dad's response came quickly. Just an eye-roll emoji followed by, oh, our millionaire is getting philosophical now. I set my phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline as the sun set. The tech company's buildings were lighting up one by one, like stars coming out. I remembered a similar sunset when I was 12, waiting outside the community center for Mom to pick me up after soccer practice. It had started to rain, but I stayed put because she always told me not to wander off. After an hour, I finally called home, my fingers numb from the cold. Dad answered, told me Mom had forgotten. Just walk home, he said, like I was being dramatic. It's only a couple miles. I walked in the rain, soaked to the bone, shivering. When I got home, Mom was watching Oprah, completely absorbed. She barely looked up when I came in, dripping water all over the carpet. Oh, was that today? She asked absently. As Nietzsche said, that which does not kill us makes us stranger. I've been carrying that strangeness ever since, the odd feeling of being both part of family and completely separate from it. The invisible son. I looked at my phone again, at that dismissive text from Dad. I could feel that familiar tightness in my chest, the old wound reopening. But something was different this time. The success, the money, the recognition I'd achieved, they gave me a perspective I didn't have before. I wasn't that kid in the rain anymore. I was someone who had built something valuable, something that mattered. I opened my banking app and stared at the balance. More money than I ever thought I'd have at 25. Money that could solve problems. Money that could, apparently, finally make my family notice me. But at what cost? As much as I wanted to send a snarky response, maybe a screenshot of my bank balance with a big red X over it, I couldn't. Not because I'm some saint, but because I knew my dad's health was actually at risk. Hypertension runs in our family. Grandpa died from complications related to it. Besides, I had the money. It wasn't even a question of affordability. I thought about the irony of the situation. All those years I wanted their attention, their acknowledgement. Now that I had it, it came with strings attached. Financial ones, but strings nonetheless. As Ernest Hemingway put it, the world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. I wasn't sure if I was strong yet, but I was certainly broken in all the right places. I transferred $15,000 directly to the medical clinic Dad used. I looked it up online, found their payment portal, and made sure the money was earmarked specifically for his treatment. Not $2,000, but $15,000. Enough to cover whatever he needed, and then some. Not because I was trying to show off, but because I genuinely wanted him to get the best care possible. He was still my dad, even if I was just an ATM to him. After completing the transfer, I took a screenshot of the receipt. I opened our family group chat, the one I'd been excluded from for years, until Melissa suddenly added me after the party. I didn't write any message with the screenshot. Instead, I found a podcast episode titled, How to Stop Asking Your Children for Money, and dropped the link into the chat. No caption, no explanation, just a link. Was it petty? Maybe, but it felt earned. Sometimes the quietest statements speak the loudest. Or maybe I just wanted to see what would happen when I finally stood up for myself in some small way. The responses came in rapid succession. Mom, Jason, that's too much money. We can't accept that. They could, and they would. Melissa, OMG, can you help me with my credit card debt too? Classic Melissa. Dad was silent. Probably because he was getting notifications from the clinic about his account being paid in full. I didn't respond to any of them. I set my phone to do not disturb and took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the tension in my shoulders. When I got out, I had 7 missed calls and 23 new text messages. I ignored them all and ordered Thai food, treating myself to extra spring rolls because sometimes self-care looks like deep-fried vegetables. The next morning, I had an email from my mother, her preferred form of serious communication. The subject line read, "We need to talk." The body contained just one line. "We didn't raise you to be cruel." I nearly spit out my coffee. Cruel? Cruel? Paying $15,000 for medical treatment was cruel. But forgetting your 12-year-old in the rain was, what exactly? Standard parenting? I typed out a blistering response, my fingers practically burning the keyboard. Then I deleted it all and closed my laptop. As Michelle Obama wisely said, when they go low, we go high. Or at the very least, we go silent until we can form a response that won't burn every bridge we've ever built. That afternoon, Ryan called. Not texted. Actually called like it was 2005 or something. I almost didn't answer, but professional curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, so I'm calling as Melissa's boyfriend, not your employee," he began awkwardly. "She's pretty upset about the podcast link." "Is she upset about me paying for Dad's medical bills too?" I asked. "No, that part she thinks is awesome. It's just the implication that they're using you for money." "Are they not?" I countered. The silence on the other end was answer enough. Ryan might have been dating my sister, but he wasn't blind. He'd clearly seen enough to know I wasn't entirely off base. "Look," I finally said, "I don't need you playing family mediator. It's complicated." "I get it," he replied. "Just, Melissa really does look up to you. In her own way. She's been bragging about you to everyone since the party." About me? Or about my company's valuation? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Another telling silence. Then I should get back to work. Good idea. I agreed and ended the call. That evening, I got a text from Dad. Just 2 words. "Thank you." No emoji this time. It wasn't an apology or a recognition of all the years of invisibility, but it was something, a small crack in the wall. I didn't respond, not because I was still angry, though I was, but because I needed time to figure out what I actually wanted from them. Money is easy to give when you have it. Forgiveness is harder. Understanding, harder still. A week passed. I immersed myself in work, in the world I had built where people actually value my input, where I wasn't invisible. We were finalizing a deal with a major tech company to license our AI, and the stress of negotiation was almost welcome. It kept my mind off family matters. Aiden and I were celebrating a successful deal with beer and pizza in the office when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Mom. I stared at it for a moment, then excused myself and stepped into the hallway to answer. Jason, she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I've been thinking about what happened, about everything. I waited, not offering an easy out. I turned on that speaker you gave me, she continued. It's been playing my old playlists. Remember how I used to dance around the kitchen to Cyndi Lauper when you were little? Before Melissa was born. I did remember. Vague, warm memories of a time when I was the center of her world. Before I became the family tech support and ATM. Before I became invisible. I do, I said simply. I think we need to talk. Really talk. Your father is too proud to say it, but we miss you. The real you, not your money. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. As Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home. Maybe, just maybe, this was a first step on a long road home. I'll think about it, I replied, not ready to commit, but not closing the door either. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. I ended the call and rejoined Aiden, who was smart enough not to ask questions. We toasted to our success, to the world we were building, to futures unknown. The next day, I transferred the podcast subscription money to a therapist instead. Some investments are worth more than others. Therapy, as it turns out, is like debugging your own brain. Tedious, occasionally painful, but surprisingly effective. After a few sessions, my therapist, Dr. Katz, yes, like the cartoon, and no, she didn't appreciate me pointing that out, suggested I focus on what was working in my life rather than what wasn't. Your family dynamics didn't develop overnight, she said. They won't be fixed overnight either. Meanwhile, Echo Mind was taking off like a SpaceX rocket with fewer explosions. Our AI was being implemented by companies across tech, healthcare, and education. Suddenly, I was the guy reporters wanted to talk to. Me, the invisible son, was now visible to thousands of strangers who care about what I had to say. I started getting invited to podcasts, not the super famous ones, but the kind where tech enthusiasts with good microphones ask surprisingly insightful questions. On one show called Algorithms and Alesh, I found myself joking. I'm from Austin, I love tacos, and I avoid family group chats. The audience laughed, but I knew better than anyone that humor is often just a parachute we deploy when we're in freefall. Life was settling into a new normal. I'd reached the daytime with my family, regular, cautious text exchanges with Mom, the occasional update about Dad's health, improving, thanks to the treatments I'd paid for, and Melissa's constant stream of selfies and humble brags. Ryan had transferred to our West Coast office. His choice, not mine. I think we were both happier with a bit more distance between the professional and the personal. One Tuesday in April, I was working from a coffee shop near downtown. Sometimes the office walls start closing in after too many consecutive 14-hour days. I was hunched over my laptop, deep in some particularly thorny code, when a voice interrupted my focus. Is that seat taken? I looked up, ready to offer my standard dead-eyed, go ahead, I'm not using it, when I saw her. Tall, with curly hair pulled into a messy bun, glasses perched on her nose, and a book tucked under her arm. The title immediately caught my eye. Design Patterns. Not exactly like coffee shop reading. All yours. I managed, clearing my throat and gesturing to the chair across from me. She settled in with minimal fuss, ordered a matcha latte, and opened her book without another word. No scrolling through social media, no loud phone calls, just focused reading. In the age of perpetual distraction, it was like watching an endangered species in its natural habitat. I tried to return to my code, but my concentration was shot. My eyes kept drifting to her coffee cup, where she'd written her name, Claire. I noticed she was making notes in the margins of her book, actual, physical notes with a pen, like some kind of coding archaeologist. After about 20 minutes of pretending to work, while secretly trying to figure out if asking, "So, you're into software design?" was the lamest pickup line in history, she looked up and caught me staring. "Your algorithm has a memory leak." I blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" She nodded toward my laptop screen. Line 137. "You're not clearing that array properly. It'll work fine for small datasets, but it'll crash spectacularly once you scale up." She was right. I'd been struggling with that exact issue all morning. "Are you spying on me?" I asked, half joking, half genuinely confused. She smiled for the first time, and something in my chest did a weird flip. I recognized that framework. Been there, debugged that. Then she returned to her book as if she hadn't just saved me hours of frustration. That's when it hit me. Her username on the book margin notes. Coding Claire 322. The same Coding Claire 322 who had eviscerated my code on GitHub 2 years ago with the Immortal Comet. Your algorithm is like the Matrix Revolutions. Lots of noise, very little substance. "You're Coding Claire 322, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. She looked up again, eyebrow raised. "Should I be concerned that you know my GitHub username?" I quickly explained about the scathing code review she'd left on my open source project. "You said my nested loops were a crime against computing." Her eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, your Deep Thought 86? That was your repository." I nodded, expecting an apology perhaps. Instead, she laughed. "Well, you fixed it, didn't you? Your code is much better now." "Thanks to your ruthless critique," I replied, finding myself smiling despite myself. "I call it tough love for algorithms," she said with a shrug. We ended up talking until the coffee shop closed. Claire was a senior developer at a competing AI firm, which should have made things awkward, but somehow didn't. She was brilliant, honest to the point of bluntness, and laughed at my jokes about dial-up internet from the 90s. With her, I wasn't Jason Chun, CEO of EchoMind. I wasn't a guy with $8.6 million in funding. I was just a fellow coder who'd once written some embarrassingly inefficient loops. That night, lying in bed, I found myself wondering, was this love or some kind of open-source destiny? As Paulo Coelho wrote, "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." Maybe the universe had been conspiring all along, starting with that brutal GitHub comment 2 years ago. Our first date was at a robotics exhibition, because nothing says romance like watching mechanical arms sort color blocks. Our second was a coding competition where we finished dead last because we spent more time arguing about optimal sorting algorithms than actually solving the problems. By the third date, I knew I was in serious trouble. Claire was different from anyone I'd ever met. She didn't care about my company's valuation or my increasing public profile. She cared that I used spaces instead of tabs, a point of fierce contention, and that I could explain quantum computing concepts while slightly drunk, a skill I didn't know I possessed until tested. "Your code isn't who you are," she told me one night as we sat on my apartment balcony, sharing takeout and watching the sunset. "It's just how you think. The bugs aren't failures. They're how you learn." It struck me that no one in my family had ever tried to understand how I thought. They'd never been interested in the why behind what I did, only in what I could do for them. With Claire, I felt seen, not for what I had, but for who I was. As we grew closer, Claire started encountering the occasional story about my family. I tried to be fair, to present a balanced picture, but the truth had its own gravity. "Let me get this straight," she said one evening as we walked along Lady Bird Lake. "Your sister's boyfriend worked for you, but didn't know you were a brother because you'd never met in person, and then you showed up at your mom's birthday party and blew everyone's minds?" When she put it that way, it sounded like the plot of a bad sitcom. That's the simplified version, yes. "And now they only call when they need money?" I winced. Also, yes. Claire shook her head. That's some serious emotional constipation right there. I couldn't help but laugh at her assessment. Claire had a talent for cutting through layers of complexity to the core of an issue, whether it was faulty code or faulty relationships. Speaking of Ryan, he sent me an email about a month after Claire and I started dating. The subject line was simple: resignation. The body wasn't much longer. You're a genius, and I thought you were just some coder. I'm sorry about the circus at the birthday party. I've accepted a position at Oracle. Good luck with everything. I stared at the email for a long time before sending a one-word reply. Accepted. Then I deleted his contact information. It was a clean break, professionally speaking. As for his relationship with Melissa, that was none of my business anymore. Some systems are better off running independently. Work continued to expand. We secured major contracts, hired dozens of new employees, and moved into a larger office in downtown Austin. The press started calling us the next big thing in AI, which Aiden found hilarious given that we'd been grinding away in obscurity for years before anyone noticed. Remember when we were coding in my studio apartment and eating ramen 3 meals a day, he asked during a champagne toast after signing our biggest client yet. Remember when you insisted blue hair would make you a better programmer? I countered. It did, he said with absolute conviction. The algorithm doesn't lie. Through it all, Claire was my constant. She understood the pressure, the late nights, the exhilaration of solving impossible problems. She also understood my complicated relationship with my family in a way no one else did. They don't see you, she said simply. They never learned how. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of investor meetings, I opened my phone and saw the family group chat icon. I hadn't checked it in weeks. Mom had been sending occasional updates, mundane stuff about neighborhood gossip and Dad's garden. Melissa posted daily selfies and links to her growing Instagram account, now featuring Tech Insider content thanks to her tangential connection to me. I hovered my thumb over the exit group button. It would be so easy to cut this last tenuous link, to amputate the part of my life that had caused so much pain. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Maybe the best revenge against invisibility was to simply disappear on my own terms. But something stopped me. A memory of Mom dancing to Cyndi Lauper in the kitchen, Dad teaching me to throw a baseball before Melissa was born, and his attention divided. Small moments of connection amid years of disconnection. I didn't exit the chat, but I did mute it, a middle ground that felt right for now. I'd left that smart speaker with Mom, programmed with all her 80s favorites. The playlists that had been the soundtrack to my childhood were still in my head. Maybe someday she'd turn it on and remember the sun she used to see. That night, Claire and I were watching a documentary about early internet culture, laughing at the ancient dial-up modem sounds that today's kids would never recognize. You know what I love about you? She asked, turning to face me on the couch. My efficient coding style? I suggested. She rolled her eyes. No, you still use too many nested loops. I love that you're still trying with your family. Even after everything, you're still leaving the door open. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd seen my inability to completely cut ties as a weakness, not a strength. But maybe there was something to be said for persistence, for believing in the possibility of change even when evidence suggested otherwise. As Leonard Cohen beautifully wrote, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Maybe those cracks in my family relationships weren't just broken places, but opportunities for new understanding to seep through. Perhaps the light was already finding its way in through those small openings I'd left. Claire fell asleep against my shoulder halfway through the documentary. I watched her breathing steadily. This brilliant, brutally honest woman who'd once told me my code was garbage and later told me my heart was gold. With her, I wasn't invisible. I was seen, valued not for what I could provide, but for who I was at my core. I realized then that I'd found a new kind of family, one that didn't share my DNA, but shared my values, my passion, my vision. Aiden, who believed in our idea when it was just scribbles on a napkin. Our team at EchoMind, who poured their creativity and brilliance into building something meaningful, and Claire, who saw through my successful CEO veneer to the nerdy kid still trying to debug his life. They were the ones who really saw me, and maybe that was enough. Perhaps, as Friedrich Nietzsche suggested, you must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. All that family chaos had somehow led me here, to people who truly appreciated the star I was becoming. A year after meeting Claire, I found myself in a place I never expected to be, standing backstage at a TEDx event in Portland, about to address a theater full of strangers. The red circle on the stage looked smaller in person than it did in all those YouTube videos I'd binged while preparing. My talk wasn't scheduled to be about artificial intelligence or venture capital or any of the tech topics that fill my daily life. I was going to talk about silence, the silence of being unseen in plain sight. My hands were sweating as I checked my note cards one last time. Claire appeared at my side, straightening my collar with a gentle touch. "Remember, they're just people who want to hear your story," she said. "And your story matters." The stage manager signaled 5 minutes. I took a deep breath and thought about how I'd gotten here. 6 months earlier, I'd given a guest lecture at the University of Texas about ethics in AI. Afterwards, a woman approached me and introduced herself as a TEDx curator. "Your technical insights were interesting," she'd said, "but what really caught my attention was how you talk about technology, making invisible people visible. There's a personal story there, isn't there?" And somehow, over coffee, I'd found myself telling her about my family, about growing up invisible, about finding my voice through code. Before I knew it, I was filling out an application for TEDx Portland with a talk titled "Invisible, Not Silent." Now the moment had arrived. The host announced my name, and I walked onto the stage, the spotlights momentarily blinding me. The crowd was a blur of faces. Somewhere in the front row sat Claire, along with Aiden and a few of our team members who'd flown up to support me. When I was 14, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. I wrote a note to my mother asking a simple question: "Would you notice if I didn't come home?" I told them how I'd left that note on the kitchen counter one morning before school, heart pounding, half terrified she'd read it and half terrified she wouldn't. When I returned that afternoon, the note was gone. I waited for her to mention it, to ask if I was okay, to show any sign that my pain had registered. But nothing came. Years later, when cleaning out my childhood home, I found that note tucked inside an old bills folder in her desk drawer, still sealed in the envelope I'd left it in with Mom, written on the outside. She had put it away without ever opening it. "I carried that silence with me," I continued, "like a Walkman cassette tape you're embarrassed to let anyone see. You know the one, that mixtape with songs that revealed too much about how you really felt." The audience laughed, that knowing chuckle of shared nostalgia. Gen Zers and elder millennials nodding at the memory of carefully curated cassettes containing our teenage souls. I didn't mention my company by name or talk about our funding. This wasn't about professional success as redemption. Instead, I spoke about how technology often mirrors our deepest human needs: connection, recognition, validation. How the algorithms I built to understand human communication were, in some ways, born from years of not being understood myself. "We think invisibility is about not being seen," I explained, "but it's really about not being heard, about having no voice, or having a voice that echoes in an empty room." I shared how my journey from invisibility to visibility wasn't just about external validation or success. It was about finding people who actually listened, who heard my voice through the noise, about realizing that family isn't always defined by DNA, but by who tunes into your frequency. "Family," I said, looking directly into the audience where Claire sat, "isn't always the people who see you at the dinner table. Sometimes it's the people who hear your voice even when you're silent, the ones who notice the gaps between your words and ask what's filling them." The theater was completely quiet now, hundreds of people listening intently. No notification pings, no shuffling feet, just presence. I finished by talking about the choices we all have when we've been silenced. We can retreat further into invisibility, or we can learn to radiate so brightly that we cannot be ignored, not out of spite or vengeance, but as an act of self-reclamation. I'm no longer waiting to be seen, I concluded. I've decided to shine instead. The applause was immediate and overwhelming. As I bowed and stepped off the stage, I felt a curious lightness, as if I'd finally set down a weight I've been carrying my entire life. Backstage, Claire was waiting with tears in her eyes and a proud smile. She handed me a small wrapped package. "Open it later," she whispered. That evening at our hotel, I unwrapped Claire's gift. It was a physical copy of my just-published book, Invisible, Not Silent. She'd somehow gotten an advance copy from my publisher. On the title page, she'd written, "To the man whose voice changed my world." I flipped to the dedication page, where I'd written, "Mom, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm shining." It was my final attempt at connection, a door left ajar rather than slammed shut. Whether my mother would ever read those words was beyond my control. What mattered was that I'd written them. 2 weeks after the TEDx talk, the video went viral. My phone exploded with messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers who resonated with the experience of invisibility. Among the flood of notifications was a text from my mother. "I saw your talk. Can we meet?" We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Chicago, halfway between her life and mine. The conversation was awkward, halting, occasionally painful. She brought my book with her, the pages already dog-eared and highlighted. "I didn't know," she said simply. "I didn't see." I didn't offer immediate forgiveness or promise that everything would be perfect. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I listened to her story, her struggles, her blind spots. We were two imperfect humans trying to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time. As the Persian poet Rumi wisely noted, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." My wounds hadn't magically disappeared, but they had become doorways for understanding, both for myself and, potentially, for my family. Dad and I established a fragile peace, built more on mutual respect and deep emotional connection. Melissa and I developed an adult sibling relationship that, while never close, was at least honest. My smart speaker gift still played Mom's 80s playlist, a small bridge across the years of silence. 6 months after the TEDx talk, Claire and I were sitting on the rooftop of our new apartment, watching the sunset over Austin. Our cat, yes, I'd upgraded from a cactus to a living, breathing creature that needed care, was purring contentedly between us. "Do you ever regret going public with your story?" she asked, sipping her wine. I thought about it. "No," I finally answered. "I spent too many years being quiet. The world has enough silence." In the distance, the lights of downtown Austin were beginning to twinkle like earthbound stars. Echo Mine had grown beyond anything I'd imagined, our technology helping people communicate more effectively across barriers of language, culture, and ability, the invisible being heard. I don't expect my mother to fully understand me, or to suddenly become the parent I needed as a child. That's not how healing works. I'm not waiting for her to open that metaphorical box and see me clearly. As Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And I've chosen to become visible, not through wealth or success or public recognition, but through my own voice, telling my own story, shining my own light. Being seen is nice, but being heard is transformative. I'm no longer the invisible son. I'm just a guy who found his voice and decided to use it. And in the end, that's enough.